On the evening of July 11th, 1908, two young boys were walking along the edge of Teal Pond, a small, murky body of water just outside Sand Lake, New York. It was the kind of place locals fished in during the summer and avoided in the winter. Quiet, still, and isolated. What they found floating there would change the town forever. There, face down, in the shallow body of water, was the bloated, lifeless body of a young woman, a straw hat drifting nearby. Her gloves and purse were missing. Her corset had come undone, and her face, swollen and bruised, was barely recognizable. Authorities would later identify her as 20-year-old Hazel Drew, a local governess with no known enemies and no obvious reason to wind up dead. Her killer had left no note, no clear motive, and no trail, as most killers tend to do, right? Just a girl in a pond and a town full of secrets. The discovery launched a media frenzy and one of the most baffling murder investigations in early 20th century America. But more than a century later, Hazel's death remains unsolved, and it wasn't just the crime that caught people's imaginations. It was the strange details, the unanswered questions, and the whispers that maybe, just maybe, someone powerful wanted the story buried deeper than the body itself. Hazel Drew was, by all appearances, the kind of woman you'd trust to take care of your children. She was educated, polite, modestly stylish, and well-spoken. Everything that fit the image of a proper young lady in 1908. Born in 1888 in the rural outskirts of Sand Lake, Hazel came from a large German-American family with modest means. She had taken up work as a governess, most recently employed by Professor Edward Carey, a prominent faculty member at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. It was considered respectable work, demanding but safe. She had been with the Carey family for 4 years. But something changed in the weeks before her death. Hazel abruptly quit her job. There was no big argument, no scandal that anyone could see. She simply told people she was planning a trip, maybe even heading to New York City, though the destination seemed to shift depending on who asked. Some say she wanted to go to Boston. Others recall her mentioning a return to Troy. But no one could pin down exactly what her plans were, or who she was meeting. When she boarded a trolley on July 6th, heading north, it would be the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Whatever she was doing, it was spontaneous. She withdrew her last paycheck from the bank before disappearing, and according to some accounts, she was dressed nicely that day, almost as if she were preparing for something important. But what? Was it a job interview, a romantic rendezvous, or something darker she couldn't share? The investigation into Hazel Drew's murder quickly devolved into chaos. Not because there weren't leads, but because there were too many. Early on, suspicion fell on a local coachman named Frank Smith, who had been seen with Hazel shortly before her disappearance. He claimed that they were friends. Others whispered he was in love with her. There was also mention of a young farmhand who reportedly had a crush on her and may have seen her walking near the woods alone, but nothing ever stuck. What kept investigators spinning wasn't the pool of suspects, it was the nature of the rumors. People claimed Hazel had been meeting a married man in secret. Some insisted she was pregnant. Others said she had been involved in spiritualism, attending seances or contacting mediums. A not common pastime among young women of the period, but one that added an eerie layer to the narrative. There was also speculation that Hazel may have been blackmailing someone, perhaps a politician or a professor. She had worked in close quarters with a well-connected family, and people started to wonder whether she had learned something she wasn't supposed to. It's here the story shifts from a local tragedy to a potential cover-up. The idea that someone important had something to hide wasn't just gossip. It was a theory seriously entertained by investigators at the time. But the evidence remained frustratingly circumstantial. A bloody handprint found near the crime scene was never matched to anyone. Her autopsy revealed that she had been struck hard in the head, likely with a blunt object, possibly a wooden plank or a metal pipe. She hadn't drowned. She had already been dead when she was dumped in the water. Teal Pond was, and still is, a strange place. Tucked into a bend off Taberton Road, it's a wooded area that seems almost designed for secrets. Back in 1908, the road was even more remote, and yet somehow Hazel ended up there. Her body was fully clothed, but oddly, her corset had been undone. That was unusual enough that reporters commented on it repeatedly. Her gloves were missing, her purse was never found, and her hat was found floating nearby. Her body had likely been in the water for at least a day or two before discovery. That timing was critical because several people thought they saw her after July 6th. Some swore they saw her walking along the road near the woods. Others claimed they spotted her speaking with a man near a general store. But none of those sightings were ever confirmed. It's entirely possible that whoever killed Hazel kept her alive for several days before finally dumping her body. Or, more chillingly, that her body had gotten moved to the pond after lying hidden somewhere else. The autopsy also revealed undigested food in her stomach, suggesting she had eaten shortly before her death. This detail hinted that she may have met someone for dinner, possibly with someone she knew or trusted. If this was a robbery, it was sloppy. If it was a crime of passion, it was strangely calculated. If it was a cover-up, then the killer had time to move the body and never get caught. Sand Lake was small enough that everyone knew everyone, and that made Hazel's murder feel like a betrayal. The town's image of peace and order cracked overnight. Newspapers from Albany to New York City ran headlines about the Teal Pond mystery, feeding readers a near daily dose of updates, speculation, and scandal. One headline read, "Pretty Hazel Drew and her tragic fate. Did she know too much?" Another asked bluntly, was it politics or passion? But beyond the press, the town itself began to fracture. Some locals claimed the police botched the investigation by letting important suspects walk free. Others believed powerful figures had intervened behind the scenes. The Carey family, Hazel's former employers, refused to give detailed interviews. The silence only fueled more speculation. Was Hazel involved with someone in the family? And was that why she left her job so suddenly? I personally would assume that if she was like involved with the hubby, that maybe she or hubby wanted, and she was just like, nah, and then she quit because of that. Even more unsettling were the whispers of seances and spirits. Some residents claimed that Hazel had once attended spiritualist meetings in Troy, and a few believed her spirit still haunted the area near the pond. Strange lights were reported in the woods. People claimed to hear a woman's voice calling out at night. Whether those stories were born from trauma, folklore, or guilt is hard to say. But one thing's for sure. Hazel Drew never truly left Sand Lake. For most of the 20th century, Hazel's case faded into local lore, a cold case half remembered, whispered about by old-timers and passed down like a dark family secret. But in the early 1990s, she reemerged, this time in pop culture. That resurrection came courtesy of Twin Peaks, the surreal, cult classic television series by David Lynch and Mark Frost. The story of Laura Palmer, a beautiful, secretive teenager found dead near a bottle of water, drew unmistakable parallels to Hazel. Mark Frost would later reveal that the character of Laura Palmer was directly inspired by the stories his grandmother used to tell him as a child. She lived in Sand Lake and spoke of a ghostly figure haunting the woods, a murdered girl who had never been avenged. That girl was Hazel Drew. And the similarities go deeper. Both Hazel and Laura had secret lives. Both were seemingly perfect on the outside, but involved in affairs, hidden meetings, and possibly dangerous company. Both were found in isolated water with strange personal effects missing. Both cases left behind more questions than answers, and both became legends that blurred the line between real and unreal. In a way, Hazel Drew is the original Twin Peaks mystery, a seemingly small-town tragedy that unravels into something far bigger, messier, and more haunting than anyone expected. Over a century has passed since Hazel's body was pulled from Teal Pond, and still, no one has been arrested. Naturally, they're probably not alive anymore, but still. No charges, no confessions, no closure. The suspects are long dead. The paper records have yellowed and crumbled. The woods have reclaimed parts of the trail, and yet her name still lingers in the town's collective memory. Modern researchers, armchair sleuths, local historians, and paranormal investigators have tried to piece the puzzle back together. Some have combed through newspaper archives, hoping to spot disappearances or clues that earlier reporters missed. Others have interviewed descendants of witnesses, hoping that family secrets passed down might offer something new. One local author even published a detailed book attempting to reconstruct Hazel's final days. And yet, for every new theory, another roadblock appears. Evidence was mishandled, testimonies conflict, key documents were either lost or sealed long ago. Even if the killer's name were discovered today, chances are they're long gone, buried under a headstone as quiet and cold as Hazel's. But still we ask, why would someone kill Hazel Drew? Who was she meeting that day? What did she know? And what secrets went to the bottom of that pond with her? And perhaps most chilling of all, what if the person who killed her never left? Hazel's story is more than just a local mystery or a historical footnote. It's a mirror held up to a moment in time, a world where class, gender, and power dictated that what questions could be asked and what answers were allowed to exist. Her death sparked fear, gossip, and folklore. Her legacy inspired one of the most iconic mysteries in television history, and through it all, her real story has never been solved. Maybe it never will be, but if you ever find yourself near Sand Lake, standing at the edge of Teal Pond, as the mist rolls in and the trees sway just a little too quietly, listen closely. Some say you can still hear her name whispered in the pines. Hazel Drew. This has been Cracked Relic, and as always, sources will be down in the description and coming up after this. And thank you for watching.